Hello, and thank you for joining us for the Key to Crushing Hiring Goals, Master the Candidate Relationship. This program is part of the SHRM webcast series. You can learn about upcoming and on-demand events from our newsletters and the webcast homepage at shrm.org/webcast. SHRM thanks GoodTime for sponsoring this program and our series of free webcasts for the HR community. Now on to today's program, the Key to Crushing Hiring Goals and Master the Candidate Relationship. You will learn under the rundown, the big question: how do we get here? Insights and takeaway, and that will lead right into the Q&A. To lead our program will be Ahryun, who is the co-founder and head of company strategy at GoodTime. In finance, she was disheartened by the lack of time she spent on strategic analysis, which encouraged her to teach herself how to code and build an enterprise-grade software. Moon graduated from McCombs Business School and earned her bachelor's degree in business administration in 2008. With introductions complete, I'm pleased to now turn the webcast microphone over to our speaker, Ms. Moon.
Thank you, Roshanda. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here. Today, I would love to have a discussion around meaningful candidate relationships. It's not the word that everyone is very used to. Typically, candidate experience is the words that people are very familiar with. But in this new climate, job market climate, we are really seeing candidate relationship being a lot more important than one-sided experience. So we will have that conversation today. And this was a really huge question in our head. So over the past 2 years, we at GoodTime have done a lot of listening. We do pay a lot of close attention to the industry at large. We reach out and listen to you, TA leaders, and also we listen to your customers, also known as your candidates. After gathering a ton of anecdotal as well as quantitative information through our research, we found that candidates in this new hybrid and remote world were looking for genuine connections with potential employers when they make a decision on which job offer to take. So in turn, we wanted to answer this extremely important question. Do companies that build meaningful candidate relationships have better hiring goal performance than those that do not? And before we head into that discussion, I would love to throw up this poll question for everyone to chime in and answer this question: what, if anything, does your organization do to build a meaningful relationship with candidates during the recruiting process? We'll give it a few seconds here until everyone has a chance to submit your question, and we'll see the result together. All right, I think the answers are rolling in. Thank you for that. I saw the comment that there's music, background music that's loud. Let me know. I don't have any music on, but let me know if you still hear the music. Right. Awesome. Cool. More than 50% of the attendees have submitted their answers, so let's take a look at the results together. This is amazing. So as talent leaders, we definitely care a lot about building that meaningful relationship with candidates. And it's very apparent that we are making a lot of effort here. Looks like the top answer across the board was offer flexibility in interview scheduling. And then close runner-up to that is demonstrating your company's culture, mission, and values throughout the hiring process. So this is really awesome. So I think this is a really relevant topic for you. So we'll kind of head into the discussion, and you can see what our findings have been through our third-party research and see if it's similar to the results that we are seeing here or very drastically different. So how did we get here? The question of whether candidate relationship, building the meaningful candidate relationship, actually has strong correlation to hiring performance or hitting your hiring goal. That question is really pivotal because we are seeing a tectonic shift in the market. Many trends have surfaced in recent years. Remote and hybrid work has become a norm. So showing off your kind of cushy office and in-office perks is not necessarily as common and also not very attractive to candidates anymore. Also, the hiring process has become almost fully virtual, which means retooling of your hiring tech stack. Retaining top talent also has become more difficult as the great resignation has become a trend that's just not going away. This means an ever lengthening list of backfills. With such a shift in what people want, what candidates want in a job and an employer, potential employer, the way we hire and retain talent also has changed drastically. So at GoodTime, we actually process millions of candidates and also scheduled millions of interviews for our customers that are using our platform every year. And really, we work with really amazing companies like Salesforce, Dropbox, Zendesk, Snapchat, Zoom, Slack, and more. And through our data that we have collected, we can corroborate the fact that we are in the most hyper-competitive candidates market. We know that on average, time to hire is now around 15 days, or more like candidates are actually able to find a new job and have an offer on the table within about 15 business days, which is about 3 weeks. Candidates are interviewing also at 4 times the volume that they used to pre-pandemic, which means there's even more competition for every single qualified candidate. Also, we know that on average, candidates are getting multiple offers before making their next job move. One data point that we were able to collect, which actually is pretty consistent with the volume of interviews that candidates are doing, we hear the candidates usually get about 4 offers on the table before they actually make a choice on which job to take. So we wanted to know what the key factors were in this decision-making process, candidates' decision-making process. In this new world, candidates now put a lot of weight on a few important intangible things, such as transparency, company's vision, mission, values, also company's commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, as well as employee well-being. They actually would like to find out about those important factors by building a genuine connection with interviewers, as well as the talent team throughout the hiring process. So to stay competitive with this drastic change in what candidates are looking for, we realized that there's a strong need to completely reimagine the hiring process from ground up. But we didn't want to wonder or just go by hunch or anecdotes from different people. We are a very data-driven organization, and while listening closely and reading the room helped us form our hypothesis, we actually wanted to kind of pressure test that by reaching out to talent leaders in the industry who are on the front lines of this historic shift in the global workforce. So this led us to conduct a 100% third-party study with Qualtrics. We surveyed 560 talent acquisition leaders from director all the way to C-class executives across a variety of industries to really understand where we were succeeding, where we needed help, and also what hiring teams were doing or not doing to level up their candidate relationships, and also how those efforts impacted their bottom line hiring goals. There were a lot of findings from the survey that we did that we found to be extremely thought-provoking. But one thing that kind of surprised me, and kind of quite frankly was really shocking to us and me also personally, was that when asked about their hiring goal attainment in 2021, the respondents actually responded that on average, they attained 50% of their hiring goals. So the struggle is real for talent teams. Actually, the results were consistent across the board, despite the company size from SMBs to enterprise organizations. So let's kind of dig in and what other questions we asked around candidate relationship. So when asked which of the following hiring challenges, if any, has your company experienced over the past 12 months? The number one challenge mentioned was retaining top talent. And the next two that were pretty much very close runner-ups to retaining top talent were about not having enough candidates that have the right skill sets to fill the roles, or you actually find out during the interview process that the candidate does not have the skill sets that they claim they have on their resume. So there's a mismatch between the skill sets that they actually have and then the skill sets they listed on their resume. But all in all, this actually means that talent leaders are struggling to find the people with the right skill sets that are required for each and every role. And then the next two that you see, which is pretty close, actually, the next four are pretty much tied at 28, 29% from the proportion of the respondents who said yes to these. The next two are about remote and hybrid work challenges. As you know, the wage has gone up significantly. Also, talent leaders find that remote employees that are in geographic locations that were known to have a lower cost of living still expect much higher wages than they used to pre-pandemic. This expectation gap between what employers are willing to pay and what remote employees are looking for in terms of their compensation is also posing a huge challenge to talent leaders. Other responses were also very interesting. The words are pretty tiny, so let me read a few for you. So difficulty adapting the hiring process to remote hiring. Candidates with multiple offers was another huge challenge for them. Candidates dropping out of the hiring process was also a huge challenge. An overwhelming number of applicants. This also is very interesting now that a lot of jobs are remote or at least hybrid. Now, there's no geographic limitation as to where you can actually source your candidates from, and also where those remote candidates, which jobs remote candidates can apply for. So actually, talent leaders are getting an overwhelming number of applicants also. The next one is unrealistic compensation expectation. And then last one that I thought also was very interesting in terms of a huge challenge for talent leaders is candidate no-show. So either candidates don't show up to the interviews or candidates who accepted the offer may not show up to the job. That also is a huge challenge for talent leaders. When asked which of the following hiring challenges, if any, do you expect to experience in the next 12 months? So the previous question was about what have you experienced in the last 12 months? And we asked the same question, but we were asking about the next 12 months. Actually, the results were almost identical. This means talent leaders expect the challenges that they experienced in the last 12 months to persist in the next 12 months also. Retaining top talent was number one challenge across the board, pretty much. Everyone said that it's the biggest challenge that they're running into. And with the current zeitgeist of remote work, some might even draw the conclusion that in-office companies suffer the most because now all the jobs are remote or at least hybrid. But very surprisingly, that was not the case. In fact, fully remote companies are more than two times more likely to suffer from this retention challenge than the overall average. So as you can see, 63% of fully remote companies selected retaining top talent as the biggest challenge, which is far above the average, which was 30%. So more than 2x likely that fully remote companies are actually suffering from retention problem. So the takeaway here is that while the distance economy, meaning now companies are looking for remote workers and also employees are looking for remote jobs. So the distance economy widens the talent pool. It also widens the employer pool, which means it gives more options for top talent to choose from when it comes to the next employer that they want to work for. which it also means that it's become more critical for remote and hybrid companies to take meaningful steps to retain, attract, and win the right candidate. When asked, how would you say that the hiring landscape has changed in the past 12 months? 47%, so almost half of the respondents agree that the landscape has become more competitive over the past 12 months due to an increased demand for talent. It's not terribly surprising as we are all kind of facing the challenge ourselves. Also, it aligns with the industry reporting as a whole. But the data got very interesting when we sliced it by role. If you actually look down on this list here, about 39% of talent leaders answered that the hiring landscape actually has become less competitive. So the fact that about half of the people said it's become more competitive, which means there are the other half that either see neutral, meaning no change, or it's even become less competitive. So the results were actually very polarized, which was really interesting. So 39% on average has mentioned that talent landscape has become less competitive. We actually wanted to dig deeper into this result and wanted to slice this answer by role and see how this perception is shared across different roles. So very interestingly, when we sliced it by role, 45% of CHROs mentioned that the hiring landscape has become less competitive due to an increase in available talent who have recently quit their jobs. So obviously, the Great Resignation kind of is a double-edged sword. So there are definitely people who are quitting their jobs and looking for greener pasture, but at the same time, which means there are more people available that are looking for new jobs. The CHROs mentioned 45% of them mentioned that it's become less competitive. However, when we actually look at the responses from director level talent leaders, only about 32% of director level talent leaders agree that the talent landscape has become less competitive. So our conclusion from this is that employees who are more closely involved with day-to-day recruiting work, that higher volume of individual contributors or manager level employees have a very different perception of business functioning in the hiring market. When asked, how do you expect the hiring landscape to change in the next 12 months? The results are fairly identical, so it seems like the trend will persist. Talent leaders said they continue to see the same top 5 hiring landscape changes. However, the ability to create meaningful relationship with candidates now surpassed the hiring landscape has become more competitive due to an increased demand for talent to claim the number 1 spot on the list. So in the next 12 months, now talent leaders are putting a lot of effort and thoughts into creating the meaningful relationships. And they think that that's going to be the tectonic shift moving forward in order to stay competitive in this hyper-competitive job market. With the shift in market and what candidates are looking for, talent leaders are more concerned about their ability to, again, build meaningful relationships with candidates to stay competitive in this job market. This also means that the traditional strategies of kind of putting more candidates into the top of the funnel, just source more candidates and put them into the hiring process may not work any longer. So TA leaders who have really caught up to this, now that there are less candidates out there with the right skill sets to fill the role, which means we can't just pour more candidates into the top of the funnel. Now, TA leaders care a lot about carefully crafting the interview process so that you build that really strong relationships with the candidates so that you don't actually lose those qualified candidates in the middle of the funnel. So creating that watertight middle of the funnel, that hiring process has become even more important now that there's a shortage of talent out there with the right skill sets. So kind of let's dig into candidate relationship, what this is all about. The hiring market has really been candidate driven for a decade or so. So even before COVID, we saw record low unemployment level, and huge job creations. It was definitely a candidate driven market even before COVID, but now it is even more so after COVID. And also what candidates are looking for had changed drastically, mainly because now the jobs are mainly either remote or at least hybrid. So what they expect from an employer has changed quite a bit. So what the candidates are looking for in this new climate is that they actually want to understand, want to actually build genuine connection with the future employer, and they also would like to work for an employer that care about equity, transparency, flexibility, and also kind of a meaning that the job can give to candidates. So companies' vision, mission, values have all become really important. I think these are even more important for, and that's kind of varying degree of importance to different generations. But now the millennial generation has become the majority of the entire workforce, since they've become the predominant generation in the workforce. For millennial generation, they care even more about these intangible factors. So again, after COVID-19, it really further complicated matters as the lines between home and office blurred. And that's why millennials and also other generations, overall, candidates' priorities shifted drastically. A paycheck and benefits were just simply no longer enough, and candidates began seeking a really genuine connection with their workplace. The candidate-focused hiring practices can be split topically into 4 different buckets. Number 1 is genuine connection. Candidates want to know whether the company mission, values, and culture, which includes DEIB effort, align with their beliefs. They would like to build strong connections with potential employers to fully understand the employer's stance on those factors before making a choice on the next move. And then the second factor is transparency. Candidates desire to have a transparent hiring process. They would like an open, honest, and frequent communication from the potential employers, as well as interviewers they meet throughout the entire interview process. When candidates ask those questions about intangible factors that are important to them to interviewers, really want your interviewers to have that transparent dialogue and be able to pitch those to the candidates, company's vision, company's missions, and company's efforts and commitment to DEIB and so on. So the answers that they hear from interviewers is extremely important. And that's how they actually feel the transparency that the company cares about. And then the next one is adaptability. Now that the market has shifted so much and things are changing, and just kind of change is the only constant, it seems like, so recently. So we want candidates to be adaptable. Candidates also expect adaptability from the employers as well. So candidates would like the hiring process to really adapt to their needs. Being able to schedule interviews when they are available is really important to them, instead of kind of a traditional, like doing an all-day in-person meeting before COVID that we all used to do. So kind of adapting to candidates' schedule, candidates' needs, and their unique situation throughout the entire hiring process is what the candidates are looking for. Also, personalization of the interview process so that they can best showcase their ability and meet with more relevant people throughout the interview process have all become really important than ever before COVID. And then last one is candidate well-being, or you can also think of it as employee well-being. candidates would love to understand the potential employer's stance on employee well-being, including but not limited to mental health support and also other related benefits. Actually, mental health support has become, I think, one of the most requested HR benefits recently. So that also corroborates the fact that employees are looking for that as well. So again, to go over those 4 factors: genuine connection, transparency, adaptability, and also employee well-being. So the survey that we've done also covers what companies are doing or are planning to do in terms of cultivating candidate relationships to win top talent. And here are some of the key points that need to be mastered. Number 1 is candidate feedback. So anything that we don't measure, we won't be able to improve. So candidate feedback is really crucial in understanding how to adapt your hiring process and interviewing process to fit the needs of candidates. Number 2, it's showcasing during the hiring process or interview process employers' commitment to DEIB efforts. So I think candidates easily can notice if the DEIB efforts that the employer has committed to is either a lip service or that is really the effort that's going on in reality. So showcasing that in a very genuine manner throughout the hiring process and interview process is really important. And then last one is training your interviewers so that the quality of conversations during the interviews is really can improve. So, and this includes training them thoroughly to have intelligent conversation with the candidates and also ask unique questions that are relevant to a particular interview type or specific topic that a particular interview has to cover. And make sure that those interview questions are not repeat questions that the previous interviewers have asked. So that also really improves the candidate relationship. Candidates understand that the employer actually has put a lot of thought into the overall interview process. And the types of questions that they get are very intelligent. They enjoy answering those questions and so on. Those all matter in building candidate relationship. So again, 3 techniques that we're going to go over today, and there's definitely tools out there. Number 1 is candidate feedback. Number 2 is showcasing the DEIB effort. And then lastly, training interviewers. We'll dig deeper into each of these factors. So candidate feedback. So most companies do gather candidate feedback, do some kind of basic candidate surveys to understand how the candidates have experienced the hiring process, if they liked it or they didn't like it, if they have any specific feedback, and so on. But the problem with kind of common survey is that most survey results are not very actionable. It's because the survey usually gets sent out after the candidate gets dispositioned, which means it could be weeks, sometimes even months after they've concluded the interview process or a particular interview. So, the memory has faded a bit in candidates' minds, and also you get this lumped up answer from candidates about what they liked and what they didn't like about the hiring process. So the common challenge that talent leaders face is that, yes, I do receive feedback, but it's hard to action on them. But to have actionable feedback that can help talent leaders improve the interview process or hiring process at the granular level, a really simple, easy to answer candidate feedback, or what I call kind of candidate pulse, must be collected after each interview. This gives talent leaders to review anonymized and aggregated feedback at a granular level to see a clear pattern in the performance of a particular interview type or even a particular interviewer. And if you see the patterns, then it really helps talent leaders take substantive and real-time actions to iteratively improve the interview process. So for example, maybe you need to adjust or remove a particular interview type. It may not be working for candidates. It may be generating really bad first impression for candidates, or it may be working amazingly. It may be working amazingly to where you may want to put even more thoughts into a particular interview type. So it can, based on this granular feedback, you can actually start to think about how to adapt your hiring process to make sure your candidates feel like they're building genuine connections with your interviewers and your talent team. Or another example could be that if the feedback is granular enough, you can actually understand which interviewers are not performing well or which interviewers are performing extremely well to where other interviewers must actually benchmark their performance. So and if you actually find that some interviewers are getting kind of consistently less than optimal feedback from candidates, then you can actually put them through the training again. Or maybe interviewers are just so fatigued with way too many interviews. Maybe you can think about load balancing better, and so on. You can really dig in and fine tune your interview process to adapt the process to be more attractive to candidates. So candidate feedback, but at a granular level, is what we recommend, and it's extremely important to gather that feedback and continue to adjust your hiring process. And then the second factor that's really important, second technique that's really important, is DEIB effort, and every company cares about it. Every talent leader also cares about it. And we know when we have diverse and representative interviewer panels that companies are able to hire more diverse candidates. However, according to the recent trends, not only are you able to hire more diverse candidates if you actually showcase the EIB effort throughout the interview process and you diversify your interviewer panels, not only are you able to hire more diverse candidates, but also you can actually overall hire candidates faster, hire better top talent, better candidates. The reason why is according to the recent trends and study, more than 70% of candidates, and that's completely regardless of their background, whether it be candidates who are coming from underrepresented background or majority background, about 70% across the board have responded that they're looking for employers that publicly showcase their commitment to DEIB. So it has become one of the important factors that candidates look for when choosing the next place to work. They do want to work for an employer that genuinely care about the EIB and actually be able to show that in actions. So obviously, kind of first step to do this is to, and simple and easy way to do so is to create a one-pager. You can send to your candidates about what the employer is doing for the EIB efforts. Or I've seen a lot of companies that create a web page dedicated to how the company is taking actions on the EIB. So that's an amazing first step. However, when candidates actually come in to do the interviews and they see a very, say, a homogeneous type of interviewers panel, so interviewers that seem to be coming from the same background and so on, it's easy to find out that for candidates to know that the DEIB efforts that's advertised on the website may not really be the reality once they start working for that employer. So whether it's a lip service or a reality, they can actually have a good understanding of that throughout the interview process. And that's why for DEIB to be highlighted and showcased within the interview process, we actually recommend that you really fully diversify your interviewer panel. So you put a good representative panel of interviewers in front of every single candidate. And that really reinforces your commitment to DEIB. That really showcases the commitment throughout the entire interview process. And also, this also leads into the interviewer training, which is our next technique. But through the interviewer training, you can also train your interviewers to be able to pitch what the company is doing for the EIB effort, so the candidates can actually hear directly from the interviewers. And those interviewers are the people that they will work together with. These are their future coworkers, so they actually put a lot of weight in what they hear from these future coworkers and interviewers. So training your interviewers to be able to pitch companies' effort against the EIB is also extremely crucial in showing your commitment in actions. So actually, to dissect the EIB a little bit more, obviously the first D stands for diversity. If your webpage shows, photos of diverse employees from diverse backgrounds, however, if the candidate actually comes in to the interview process and meets with the homogeneous group of interviewers, it will not feel genuine. So again, diversifying your interviewer panel is extremely important in showcasing your commitment to diversity in action. And this is actually based on our data. We also know from our own platform data that for every 1% of improvement in diversity of your panel, so if you actually improve the diversity, number of diversity interviewers that are included in every single panel, actually companies enjoy a 2% improvement in offer acceptance rate. So it has a huge bottom line impact to diversify your interviewer panels. So it's pretty drastic, it's pretty dramatic. So it's a dramatic, scalable, and completely achievable hiring improvement. Once you have a well-represented and diverse interviewer panel, the next important step, as I kind of alluded to previously, is to train them. They can actually showcase the employer brand in the best light possible throughout the interview process. And now that leads to interviewer training. So obviously, for anyone to conduct their job and be able to do a good job, we need training. An interview is actually not an exception. Everyone, again, needs education and training to gain the skill sets necessary to do a job. Interviewing is also a learned skill set that sometimes I think many companies easily overlook. The logistics behind that can be extremely daunting. So it's understandable that it often gets overlooked, but it's extremely important. Just because you're really good at your job doesn't mean you're really good at interviewing and be able to assess candidates on particular skill set, or even be able to pitch employer brand to the candidates. So interviewing to assess the candidate for a particular skill set or soft skills takes more kind of granular training. In some cases, we definitely have seen companies that throw like the entire team of people or rather kind of random people into the interview process without any training at all. But that can be really disastrous for candidate experience and candidate relationships. So again, interview training is very important. I'd ask the following questions to yourself and your team to assess if you need to start thinking about interviewer training. So question number 1 is, do your interviewers know what questions to ask to assess the skills needed for a given role? Number 2, do your interviewers know what questions to ask to assess the culture fit or culture add or mindset needed for a given role? Nowadays, there's even more trend that companies are hiring for mindset instead of skill sets. Can your interviewers actually figure out whether they have the right mindset to be successful in a particular role? Is another very important question. Then question number 3, do they know what questions they cannot ask? Which could be a legal issue if they ask questions that they're not supposed to ask. Question number 4, do they know how to pitch the company's vision, mission, and values? I think innately employees understand company's vision, mission, and values. However, being able to pitch it in a consistent manner is a very different skill set. It's a learned skill set. So yes, you have your vision, mission, values written somewhere, but if you haven't trained them on how to pitch it the most successful way to candidates, they may not be telling the same story. And as a candidate who's come in and talked to, say, 10 different interviewers, and they get different storyline about company's mission, vision, and values, it gives the mixed signal to the candidate. So it's really hugely imperative that every single interviewer received consistent training on how to pitch these important factors about the company and be able to storytell to the candidates in a consistent manner. And then the next question is, do they understand why they have been chosen to interview a given candidate? And then lastly, this is really important in terms of being able to keep up with the hiring pace that we are seeing in the market. You have enough trained interviewers to hit your hiring goals, or are you relying on the same people to interview repeatedly and risking burning them out? Oftentimes, we actually see the same people being utilized over and over and over. That could also be the reason why your candidates are not receiving the best experience or not building, genuine connection with your interviewers. From interviewers' perspective, if they're interviewing at 8 a.m. in the morning, going to a team meeting, another interview after that, and then going into one-on-one and another interview after that, and so on, and you have these 7, 8, 10 interviews every week, it could be that they're not performing in their best self during the interviews. Actually, I've heard from some of I think it was a VP of sales from one of the companies that the person that I've known for a really long time. He actually told me that he feels really guilty coming out of every interview, thinking, man, I actually could have performed better in this interview. I feel like a terrible interviewer. So that interview fatigue is a real problem for a lot of people. So make sure that you have a really large pool of trained interviewers that you can tap into. It's actually really important. And in the next slide, I'm going to tell you kind of mathematically why it's really important, not only for interviewers' mental health, but also actually for hiring speed. But there is actually a mathematical golden rule. We actually tell our customers about this golden rule. And sometimes it's really difficult to have a lot of alternative interviewers that are well-trained, that you can rely on, and so on for every single interview. But if adding, say, 50 to 100 interviewers to every single interview as an alternative interviewers is impossible, at least have 5 alternative interviewers for each and every interview. Mathematically, this actually gives every single candidate a 95% chance that they can actually find an interview time in the near future that works for them, which means you can actually get them in the door faster. One of the biggest blockers that we've seen in shortening the time to hire actually is the number of trained interviewers. If we can just kind of throw anyone into the interview process, obviously may not be the biggest problem, but if you want your interviewer to be well-trained, you want to have specific well-trained types of interviewers for each and every interview, and you only have, say, 1 or 2 per interview based on people's calendars. Usually about 30 to 40% of calendars are booked for existing meetings, which means if you do the math and create permutations for interview times for candidates, there are actually not a lot of times you can work with. So we can totally ask our few interviewers, we have to open up more of their schedules, or we can actually train more interviewers, replicate those amazing interviewers by training more of the interviewers and creating this large pool of interviewers that you can tap into. This actually mathematically gives a lot more chance for candidates to come into the door faster. And again, knowing that candidates can get a job offer within 15 business days, if we cannot keep up with the pace of how fast candidates are moving and how competitive the job market is, potentially we may even miss the chance to put our offer on the table for the candidate that you really want to hire and bring into your organization. So again, the golden rule is 5 alternative interviewers for each interview. Hopefully that could be a good conversation you can have with your hiring managers about adding those 5 alternative interviewers. Great interviews start with amazing interviewer training. Again, great interviews generate higher offer acceptance rates. It levels up the quality of your hiring decisions also, and it supports a healthy and respectful candidate relationship, all in a way that's both successful and scalable. So all in all, the summary of our discussion today is that companies that invest in candidate relationships bolster company culture, and also they can expect higher level of productivity, loyalty, and engagement. We also just put out the 2022 Hiring Insights report. If you go to this link, you can actually download the report and read the results. There are a lot of really thought-provoking results that we have collected from 560 talent leaders across the board. I hope you enjoy reading that report when you get a chance. And thank you so much for watching. Roshanda, I think we can get to the Q&A section.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to turn to audience questions in just a moment. This webcast is sponsored by GoodTime. GoodTime Hire helps hiring teams go beyond candidate experience and make every interview count. Hire uses candidate relationship intelligence to automate coordination and build better relationships during interviews and provide actionable insights to continuously optimize the hiring process. It's the new way to establish genuine connections with top talent and win the best candidates. Over 300 companies around the world use Slack, Box, HubSpot, Spotify, and Pinterest, getting a yes up to 70% faster with Hire. Learn more at goodtime.io. Okay, now we will turn to the questions. So in terms of the candidate relationship is super qualitative, how does a team quantify this concept to get a buy-in on the right tools and techniques?
Yeah, I actually love this question because we're all about people and all about data at GoodTime. So we have a lot of thoughts around quantifying the qualitative aspects of hiring. So candidate relationship, what I think candidate relationship is it's kind of a candidate experience 2.0, but it's a lot more genuine. Candidate experience was something that was more of in some way kind of a staged experience. I still remember like taking the candidates throughout the entire office space and showing really amazing cafeteria, yoga room, really cushy office, in-office perks, and so on. And obviously there's the factor of responding fast to the candidates, keeping them in the know, and so on. So that used to be what candidate experience is all about. Now it's candidate relationship, building that genuine relationship with candidates, and it definitely had bottom line impact. So a few metrics that I would absolutely track would be offer acceptance rate. So technically, if you have 4 offers on the table as a candidate and you've built way better relationship with the interviewers that you've met and also the talent team that you've met with the particular employer, it's more likely that that candidate will choose that offer versus others, given the other factors are somewhat similar, compensation, benefits, and so on are somewhat similar. So the offer acceptance rate should improve if you do genuinely improve candidate relationship. Number 2 is candidate drop-off rate. Candidate drop-off rate has really shot up recently because it's easy to interview at 4 or 5 different places. And also when candidates now feel like, because there's just a lot higher volume, of interviewers that they can work for beyond the limitation of geographical limitation. If they feel like this is not, this employer or this interview process is just not working for them, it's easy for them to actually opt for another position, apply for another position. So we've definitely seen a hike in candidate drop-off rates. So if we build genuine relationship, candidate drop-off rate should decrease. And then the last one, but not least, is actually candidate feedback. I mentioned that in the presentation. Candidate feedback is everything. So if the candidate feedback that we receive before making those changes build genuine connection with candidates. If we compare that with candidate feedback after the changes were made, hopefully you will see candidate feedback kind of CNPS score, your candidate NPS score should improve also. So there are definitely ways to measure whether candidate relationship has bottom line impact. So again, I would definitely choose to measure those three things: offer acceptance rate, candidate drop-off rate, and candidate feedback, CNPS score.
How has the candidate relationships are different from creating great candidate experience, which is something hiring managers are always working on? What exactly do you mean by relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. I've kind of alluded to this previously, but candidate experience is a universal treatment of candidates that's pre-planned and often, sometimes it's not necessarily adapted to every single candidate. Often what candidate experience composed of or used to compose of was really nice office tour and giving them that perks and swag, and also kind of showcasing what it's like to work in the office. Really nice yoga room, game room, music room. I've even seen some offices that have karaoke and so on, which is really amazing experience as future employees. But now the world has changed so much to where your employees are potentially working fully remotely or at least hybrid, in a hybrid working mode. Those in-office perks are not, it's less of an amazing experience. What the candidates are looking for are they're actually really looking for those intangibles. Companies' commitment on transparency, DEIB, flexibility, and also even I've actually seen candidates looking to understand employers' stance on political matters, social good, and so on. They actually look for those intangibles now that the in-office perks are not as relevant for them. That's where candidate relationship comes in. And relationship is a two-way street. Experience is more of a one-way. Relationship is two-way street. Candidates would like to be understood in terms of what their needs are, how they want to be interviewed, how they want the hiring process to adapt to their needs. And then also at the same time, interviewers and talent team want to kind of showcase to the candidate, this is what we are, what company stands for, this is mission, values and vision of the company. This is what it takes to get this job and so on. So kind of it's a two-way street where both sides are creating meaningful relationships with each other. And at the end, we decide whether the candidate is the right candidate, and then also the employer is the right employer for the candidate. So yeah, all in all, I would say experience is more of a one-way street and relationship is more of two-way streets. And now candidates are looking for the two-way streets. That's what I think would be the difference between candidate experience and relationships.
This is going to be the final question. How can the competition for talent be so fierce, but now everyone is saying that the hiring boom is over?
That's a great question. So definitely, it's a really interesting dichotomy. Talent market is extremely strong still. And yet we are seeing all kinds of doom and gloom news on every single media channel, layoffs, hiring freezes, and so on. I actually wanted to dissect it a bit, so I actually did my own personal research around this also. So just to let you know, job market is still extremely strong. So actually, in May alone, in the United States, we added 325,000 jobs, which is only a hair below what we added in April. But the job market is still really strong. There are more jobs being created than ever. And unemployment rate also is pretty much all-time low, 3.5%, which is about the same as pre-pandemic. Also, wages increasing. I think just April alone, I think wage increased about 0.4%. So the job market, economists say that statistically, job market is really strong. However, we are seeing a lot of layoffs. We're seeing a lot of hiring freezes and so on. But if you actually look at the number of people that get laid off, there are a lot of companies that are kind of doing this adjusting of overcorrecting. So they're trying to correct their behavior that they had in 2021, where they were somewhat hiring maybe in some way recklessly or irresponsibly. They were hiring just too much, growing too fast. And now they're trying to correct that. And that's why we are seeing layoffs and hiring freezes and so on in many different companies. But if you actually look at the number of people that get laid off, it's not as traumatic as, say, in 2020. It's a very small fraction of the entire population of employees that gets laid off if there is a layoff, for example. So actually, even layoff number across the market is still very low compared to 2020. 2020, I think the plan for layoff was about 60,000 people also just in, say, March of 2020. In May, it's 20,000, which is even lower than or about the same level as pre-pandemic. So the planned layoff is also still very, very low. So it's a really interesting dichotomy that we're getting these news from media channels, but at the same time, statistically, job market is still extremely strong. And then the last point that I would like to make is the job market is even stronger. It's even more of a candidate market in knowledge worker hiring. Still, globally, we are seeing huge skill gap in knowledge worker hiring. And then the great resignation is definitely not slowing down. So absolutely. I think we will, despite what's going on, we will continue to see candidates market. And also, we still need to continue to pay attention to building strong candidate relations.
Well, great. We are actually coming to the end of this program. Before we sign off, we want to thank our speaker, Ahryun, for the insights she has shared today. And we also want to thank everyone for tuning in and for being with us and choosing SHRM for HR webcast. This concludes today's program.